debt surplus begins to decline in the 1970s, and interest rates really important because that's the price of money. And we see the all-time peak for that were in the 70s and 80s, which are very inflationary periods. And since then, we've had to force interest rates down continually. Right now, we're at historically high periods of inflation rate, especially for the last couple of decades. And there's all this talk of recession. There's all this talk of crisis. There's all this talk of overdoing our rate hikes and everything. And we're barely higher than we were, a couple decades ago. And so all that's to say that we're having a greater and greater financial incentive. We're becoming more and more top heavy with debt. And as we do that, we corrupt the society. So all that to say is that when the money is a lie, because we no longer have a consistent ledger, we have a greater incentive to lie. And then we eventually have a society built on lies. And that's why we have all this noise and all this chaos, both in the financial sector and the cultural sector and everything of that sort. And that's why in my opinion, that's why everything feels like it's getting worse and worse. Even though technology is getting better, objectively, we're all more prosperous than we were 10 years ago. Everything feels a little more disjointed than it was in the past. And the reason for that is because we have an abstract lie at the fundamental basis of our society. And that is that our money isn't true. When you corrupt the money, you inherently corrupt every price of everything, and you bake in inefficiency into every layer of society. So I know I just covered a lot and a lot of charts there, but I really wanted to emphasize this idea that this isn't just about money. This impacts everything in society.
Well, your last chart, I mean, everybody that you can see it online, everyone's calling it clown world, right? They're referring to everything as clown world is amplifying. It's getting worse, right? They can't describe in any type of granularity what you just described, especially with the charts that you've thrown up there, and explain the why behind it. But they can sure as heck feel it. And any person you talk to, I don't care who it is right now, everybody's like, what the heck is happening? It feels like everything's just coming off the rails. And I think it's because we're getting closer and closer to kind of the precipice of this monetary changeover that's in the works. We obviously have a bias and an opinion on where that's going. And that's for the listener to decide whether they agree or not. But I think the more that I see really smart people like yourself laying out quantitative charts that go into detail like you just showed, it's really hard to dispute and deny what we're about to go through, I think, here. Hey, let's talk a little bit about game theory. I know this is a topic that you like to cover. It's something that I haven't really covered too much on the show. I mean, we've covered it here and there, but what are some of your thoughts on game theory?
Yeah, game theory. The game theory of money is really interesting to me. The first thing to understand is that money converges on one. Why would you trust the second best money when you can just trust the best one? Silver is just an inferior gold. Take real estate. If we consider that a form of money, there's, the best piece of, you don't want the second best piece of real estate, you want the best one. And so it's the same thing with money. Why would you want the peso or the lira when you could just have the US dollar? You're taking, and everything is a risk. You might as well take the one that has a greater network effect and lower risk. And, this is what's often attributed to Metcalfe's law and Gresham's law, which I probably don't have time to get into here. But, all these theories are basically saying the same thing, that money is trust. All these monetary eras are basically various ways of saying trust. And of course, you're only going to trust the network that has more trust. Why would you trust the second best when you could just stick with the best? And so what we have here when it comes to game theory is we are currently on the edge, like I said earlier, of the becoming the ancient world of tomorrow. Even though we're the modern world yesterday, we're the ancient world of tomorrow. And when we look at everything, even before we get to Bitcoin, Bitcoin aside, what we see here is that we have an infinite supply of everything. Real estate is one of the most obvious examples. A couple thousand years ago, a stone, one-story house is a really big deal. And today, the average person can afford a apartment or duplex or, a house that's far more prosperous than a billionaire could have 100 years ago. I know perhaps we may not feel like we're as high in the social rankings as them, but, truth is they didn't have air conditioning. They didn't have Wi-Fi routers in their houses. They didn't have computers. Your phone in your pocket has a library bigger than Rockefeller's library.
They didn't have open AI that could just write them anything they want on a whim.
Yeah, exactly. So we have an infinite amount of prosperity here. Basically, we're able to create more and more houses. We're able to have more and more intelligence, like artificial intelligence, like you just referred to. More and more books, more and more information, more and more knowledge. Like take the internet here. We have more and more connections. There's more of everything. And so basically, one of my favorite visuals that I've designed to really emphasize this is this one here. Is that we have an infinite amount of pretty much everything, infinite knowledge, metals, and energy, everything like I mentioned thus far. There's an endless amount of stocks. There's an endless amount of bonds, endless amount of cash that we, denominate everything in, endless amount of houses. All these things are open systems. And what I mean by open systems, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this with your engineering background. If you have an interest in taking self-custody, if you have an interest in setting up a multi-sig solution and collaborative custody partnership, I do work at the Bitcoin Advisor precisely for this purpose because I think it is the future. You can find me in the link in the description below at the Bitcoin Advisor, where our primary goal is to help you securely transition your Bitcoin off exchanges into your own hands and into your own self-sovereignty. It's really important that you begin considering what happens to you in the event that you lose your seed phrases, what happens to you in the event that you pass on. Will your children, your loved ones, your company, your spouse, whomever your descendants are, what happens to them if your keys have issues or have troubles and have maintenance? So if you want someone to help you through that process, one-on-one, to create a multi-sig vault, to help you create an estate plan, to be an ongoing collaborative custody partner, and help reassure you in the face of all these products and all these innovations happening to Bitcoin atop the base layer, if you want to have someone assist you in the coming years and hopefully coming decades, Bitcoin Advisor could be a good place for you to consider. If you go to the link in the description, you can learn more about me and why I'm personally there as well. And I will send you dozens of pages of free documents, both about our company specifically at the Bitcoin Advisor and multi-sig and collateral custody in general. Purely educational content for you to learn about. Dozens of pages with great content, great perspectives, ideas, and thought-provoking perspectives for you to consider in the coming months and years as you take more and more of your Bitcoin into self-custody. So not only, again, do you get information about collaborative and multi-sig custody in general, and you also get information about the Bitcoin Advisor specifically. Also, I'm happy to send you, or you'll find a link below, a comparison of what Bitcoin Advisor does compared to our competition, what we provide, and our goal is to provide 10 times the value for half the cost. So if you have an interest in multi-sig, I strongly encourage you to consider it now. More and more companies are only going to have the option of multi-sig. See, a company or a charity or a church cannot pursue the option of a single sig solution. They have to pursue multi-sig solutions. So as an individual, as a company, or as a board of a charity or church, whatever the case, if you're interested in a multi-sig solution for the long term, for cold storage, I highly encourage you to start doing so now. Whether that's with me at the Bitcoin Advisor or elsewhere, I strongly encourage you to do it because that rehypothecation will continue, Bitcoin's rapid price appreciation will continue, and in those events, demand will skyrocket for these precise kinds of services and for time with people that are experts in this field. So again, once more, please check out the link in the description for the Bitcoin Advisor where you can find me. You can schedule a meeting with me. You can book a free consultation with me there. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Again, happy to send you dozens of pages of free complimentary information for you to learn more about your Bitcoin and learn more about your Bitcoin self-custody solutions. Because again, whether you work with me or not, it's far more important. Please just consider taking self-custody as soon as possible. Link in the description. Thanks. But, open systems, the way I like to put it to people, is that for the entirety of humanity thus far, what we have is basically a little ocean where we have a bunch of different ships. We have a bunch of different ships with holes in their hulls, and they all are taking on water. They're open systems. There's literally a hole in their hull, and they're taking on water. And so they're sinking at different rates. Again, to go back to the British pound, 800 years ago or so, you could trade 1 pound for almost a dozen cows. And obviously today, the cows are much more expensive in relative terms to the pound, but cows are also cheaper because, we have more humans or more cows, and the value of 1 cow in real terms is much cheaper than it used to be. However, the British pound conversion rate to cows is significantly higher. And the reason for that is that cattle, if we can think of cattle as a system, is basically becoming more and more affordable to people as that system leaks value, it leaks energy, and it becomes more affordable, and the brute force physical cost of acquiring cows goes down. But the value of the pound goes down faster. So if we're thinking of 2 ships, the pound is sinking at a faster rate than the cow. And so what people have done in the ancient world is that they would save in things that quote unquote sunk the slowest. You save in gold, you save in cattle and, lambs. And, back in the day, your farm was your livelihood. And then, of course, today, a better example would be that of real estate or bonds or stocks. There's an endless amount of real estate. We can always make more houses. We can always build higher, and perhaps maybe in the future build more land, who knows, or at least more efficiently use our land. Take stocks. There's an endless amount of companies, an endless amount of brands, and those companies can issue more stocks. Granted, there are regulations that they have, but at the end of the day, there's an endless amount of stocks that could be issued to the market. And bonds, similarly, there are regulations and expectations for, these fixed income assets. But at the end of the day, we can create more debt. We can always make more debt. And so what we have here are a series of open systems that we save in versus cash, because we can't trust our cash. Who's going to trust our cash? It's the most open system of all in our modern world. And so we're leaving this world where we have these 99 ships that are sinking at different rates, and we're entering this world where for the first time we have a closed monetary system. And this is something that was predicted. I spoke about this on my previous podcast and in my threads as well. But this is something that was predicted by many folks. Four of the most famous ones were Tesla in 1900, and then Ford in 21, Hayek in 84, and Friedman in 1999. These were some of the most famous people that predicted the eventual arrival of this closed ledger. Granted, they predicted different aspects of it, but they all pretty much predicted the same thing, that eventually, as the world becomes more and more prosperous, that we can't save in these assets anymore. And we eventually need something, some ledger we can create that's actually a consistent monetary stock of the human race, basically. And that's what we have here, that we have infinite everything, but we have one closed monetary system. And really quick, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts from an engineer's perspective.
Mhm.
One of the metaphors I love is that of oxygen. Of all the assets in the world, the most essential one for human survival is oxygen. Water is important. Heating is important. It's very cold outside. I need that to live. Food obviously is important, but oxygen, from a physiological standpoint, is the most essential commodity of the human race. Your brain, on a scientific level, has the greatest and fastest fear response of a lack of oxygen. So, technically speaking, oxygen is the most valuable thing in our lives that we could own, and yet we never pay for it. And the reason we never pay for it is because its supply is infinite. And so, yes, demand is important, but supply, I would argue, is just as important and more important, because if there's an infinite supply of a very valuable thing, its price, in relative terms to everything else, trends down forever. And so the Mona Lisa is the other example I like to use. There's only one Mona Lisa. You don't need it to survive. You're not going to die in 5 minutes or ever if the Mona Lisa were to be destroyed somehow in some horrific accident. But yet the price, the exchange rate, say, between the Mona Lisa and oxygen is trending up forever. If you were to denominate the Mona Lisa in terms of oxygen, its value, relative value, just continues to appreciate. And that's more or less what we have here, that we have all these infinite systems. And eventually it became evident to these geniuses of the past and to the Bitcoiners of today that eventually, if we're going to continue into the information age, we need some sort of decentralized, distributed monetary system that has a fixed supply cap, that's an immutable ledger, and all these other qualities of good money, which we don't have time to get into here. But basically what it is a system that is closed. And that's why, Saylor, as an example you brought up earlier, he's an engineer. And in my discussion, you're an engineer, and other people I talk to, in my personal experience, engineers understand Bitcoin much faster than financial experts. And I believe that's because engineers are trained to understand the strength and survivability of a given system. And once one realizes that Bitcoin is designed to be an economic energy storage system that doesn't have an energy leak as a function of time, you realize that it's inevitable. So I want to hear your thoughts on that as an engineer.
As an engineer, you got me all excited there with that last statement, because I mean it's really coming down to the law of conservation of energy. Energy cannot be created nor destroyed. And when you're looking at the existing system, the fiat system, I mean, let's just say the whole fiat global system is 100 units, right? And then tomorrow it's 105 units. And then the day after that, it's 110 units.